Everyone. My name is Emily. Some of you know me as a tour guide with MEJDI Tours, where I guided dual narrative tours in Israel and Palestine. I would like to welcome our second session of Women's Leadership Series, From Tragedy to Triumph, Overcoming Loss and Fighting for Peace. This webinar is hosted by Interact Organization. Interact is the sister nonprofit organization of MEJDI Tours. This webinar is part of building an educational center where we can bring the multi-narratives of conflict out to the wider world, building empathy and understanding on a much larger scale, which is very much needed right now. Today's talk is special. I wanted to introduce our moderator. So it happens that she is not here now due to an incident that happened in her village, Huda Abu Raqub. The village is Dura. So I'll be moderating today's session, and therefore I would like to introduce Kim and Layla, two amazing women activists and peace builders. Actually, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. I'm just going to say very short about you. Kim is our Director of Operations in MEJDI Tours. And Layla, I'm getting to know her as a fabulous person. Would you like to start by introducing yourselves? Kim.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been having these talks and conversations for the last week now. And I truly appreciate seeing so many people that are interested to learn more, and they're able to stay in the room. I keep saying that until now, no one left the room. And unfortunately, we're not talking about easy topics. But it's fabulous to see that people are able to keep hopeful and to listen to the difficult dialogue. So I'm honored to be here also with Layla and Emily, of course. I'm Kim. I'm an Israeli. Don't be fooled by my semi-American accent. I'm born and raised in Israel. Grew up a few years in the States, and that's where I got my accent. I want to say another short sentence in my introduction is as you'll hear our stories, and as I'm sure a lot of people in the region have experienced, I myself have experienced and encountered trauma. And I usually say that it's a continuous post-trauma, continuous PTSD, because we're living through trauma and it's not something that we leave behind in the past. My coping mechanism is smiling and laughing. So I'm sorry in advance if I smile when I'm talking about the difficult part. I ask that you understand it and not be judgmental or be offended of it. Yeah, that's me for now. Layla?
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim and Emily, and thank you for inviting us today to share with you our stories and to speak about the situation right now. My name is Layla Sheikh. I'm from a village called Batir. It's between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. I'm 46 years old. I'm a mother to 5 children. And I was born and raised in Jordan. I finished my study in accounting and business and came to Palestine in 1999. I am a member of the Parents Circle Family Forum for bereaved families from Israel and Palestine. Maybe our organization is the most unique organization because we didn't seek for a new member, because to be a member in the forum, that means that you lost closest family member to the conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Today's talk is about tragedy to triumph and overcoming loss and fighting for peace. Seems that everyone in this land has a story, and it starts somewhere. And this is why we think it's very special that we brought you to today and here to tell your stories. And we think it's very important to have these stories go to the international community, but also in the same time to bring this story to the other side, no matter who is the other side. I would like to ask you to tell your stories of what brought you here today, and what is this story that you want to tell to the public, you want everyone to know. Kim, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. So my story actually starts on September 7th, not October 7th. I'll show a quick picture. Can you see you can see my screen?
Yes.
This is Yarden, one of my childhood friends, and this is my son Tom, and this is her daughter Geffen. On September 7th, we met together for a play date, and Yarden was telling me that they decided to pack their things and leave Kibbutz Be'eri. If you've heard Kibbutz Be'eri lately in the news, it's because it's one of those kibbutzim on the Gaza border. And they decided to leave because she couldn't handle the fact that her daughter is growing up in a reality where you have 15 seconds to run for shelter, which is truly not enough time to run for shelter. It means that you're most of the time lying on the floor and waiting for the rocket to hit, hopefully not on your house. They packed their things and moved back to Givatayim, where her parents lived. And we discussed that the holidays are coming up. We're going to, each of us, go on a family trip. And when we come back around October 5th or 6th, we will schedule another time to have our kids play together. On October 6th, I came back from Thailand from a family trip. So I came back from heaven, and unfortunately, I did not realize that I'm coming back to hell. As on October 7th, we woke up from sirens in Tel Aviv. I was looking at my husband and telling him that I think it's just the wind kind of blowing in the window. And we do what most of us always do: pick up the phone, check the news, check the apps that tell us when the rockets are coming. And we, of course, take the kids and run for shelter. This is when WhatsApp, our number one communication system, starts blowing up as well. And people are starting to write us. We're in the shelter here, we're in the shelter there. And Yarden is writing as well on the friends group that, again, she's in shelter. My response to that, since I did not understand why she's in the kibbutz again, was, and excuse my language, but what the fuck are you doing there? And after 10 minutes, I deleted the message because I understood that this is becoming a whole new story and not something that we're used to. It was clear very quickly that there have been break-ins from through the fence from Gaza, and there are terrorists in the kibbutzim themselves. At around 10:30 a.m., we lost contact with Yarden, and we did not hear from her again for 54 days. I'll just say that this is the point where Kim split into two people. I am Kim, the mother of two boys that need an explanation of why we're sitting in the shelter, waking them up for this. I'm Kim, the director of operations at MEJDI Tours, that has 70 travelers on the ground that I have to get them out of the country as soon as possible so that they are not hurt. That has travelers that are coming to Israel, and we caught them at the airport, some of them while boarding the plane. And then Kim, the wife, of course. But at that point, there was a new definition of Kim. It was Kim that was going to do everything to find her friend. The next day, Yarden's husband, Alon, and their daughter, Geffen, that you saw in the picture before, came back to the kibbutz to tell us that they managed to run. basically what happened was they stayed the night at Alon's family house. His mother was murdered on the spot. His sister was taken hostage. His father managed to hide in the house and stay there for around 18 hours until the IDF managed to come get him out. Yarden, Alon, and Geffen were taken in a car and started driving to Gaza. On the way, there was a tank that came in front of them, and the Hamas terrorists got out of the cars and ran to hide. This is when Alon told Yarden, this is our chance, we are going to start running away. They start running, and at some point she understands she cannot continue while they're shooting at them. She gave him her daughter and told him to run. And he managed to do that. He ran and he saved them both. We had about 6 jeeps the next day going to search for her, as it wasn't clear yet if she is lost, if she was captured again, if she managed to run as well, if she was killed. And from there, it was kind of this, I call it a decreasing optimism. It was very, very quick decreasing optimism, from a point where we thought maybe she's in shelter and she lost her phone, or maybe they lost power, to a point that we understand we don't know where she is. It took about 18 days for the IDF to confirm that she's being held hostage in Gaza. And at that point, what we were doing, I want to share again the screen. I don't know if you saw these posters all over in the US, but basically we understood that from this point on, we're going to do everything to find our friend, and to put pressure on governments, the Israeli government, the American government, the German government, etc. Her family opened what we call a war room, and we tried to do everything in our power to affect a ceasefire, to create a deal, a ceasefire that will allow letting the hostages out. So we marched, you can see me here barefoot, we marched barefoot to identify with Yarden that was kidnapped barefoot. She was a rock climber, she is a rock climber, so we did an event of rock climbing. Her family spoke in one of the demonstrations in Tel Aviv. We marched from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem on Road 1. We had another family and friends march. We painted a wall that says mothers shall return. It was clear that the first ceasefire, the first deal is going to be around mothers and children. And it was clearer that Yarden was also a mother that has been taken away from her child. And 54 days later, we get a message from her family that she's on the list. This is me and my friends. We came together to watch the news and see her coming home to her daughter and husband. I will talk later a bit about being a mother inside this whole crazy situation, but I want to add that when Yarden came back, she came back to a reality where her sister-in-law is still held captive. And from being a person that is very, very private, that does not want any attention from anyone, she has to continue the struggle to, again, create a ceasefire that will allow to bring hostages home, that will allow for people to continue living a peaceful life. I'll stop here and continue later.
Thank you, Kim, for sharing this powerful story. It's indeed motherhood that is the most powerful thing in here. And this leads me to ask Layla also to tell us of her story.
Thank you, Emily. My story started before even I was born, when my parents went to Jordan, because my father was a teacher and he went to teach the children in the camps in Jordan. And after that, the war was started in 1967. So during that time, the Israeli government closed the border, and my family lost their citizenship as a Palestinian, and they become Jordanian. So because of that, I was born in Jordan, me and my brothers and sisters. We couldn't came back to Palestine, but I love Palestine. From what I heard from my father, he have thousands of stories about his childhood, about his relative, about everything. So I love Palestine from what I heard from my father, and it's become a dream for me to go back to live in Palestine. So after I finished my study, I met my husband. He's originally from Bethlehem. So in 1999, I came to Palestine, and for me, the dream come true. I was so happy to be here, to meet all the people that my father talked about and visited all the places that my father told me. First year was amazing. I love everything here. After a second year, we have our first daughter. We become much happier because we start to have our own family. But after 2 months, the second uprising started, and I was really terrified because that was the first time I lived in war, and it was crazy situation. During that time, the Israeli government take a decision not to give people like me who came from Arab country a Palestinian ID. But I said to myself, so I will take care of my husband, my daughter after until I get my ID to see my family in Jordan. After a second year, we have our second son. He was a boy. We named him Qusay. And we become much happier to have him because our family become bigger, and I will be busy with them all the time. But that happiness was ended 11th of April 2002, 4 o'clock in the morning, when he woke up in very critical condition because at that night the Israeli soldiers came to our village and they threw tear gas. And because the treatment in our village in that time wasn't good enough, so we tried to take him in a hospital inside Bethlehem, but the Israeli soldiers prevented us and they said it's a military zone. So we tried to take him to the next city, which called Hebron. But again, they told us that the main road is closed. So the last chance was to take him through a rough and long road between villages. But again, for the third time, the Israeli soldiers stopped us to search the car, search the ID of my husband and my father-in-law. And my father-in-law, because he's the only one who speaks Hebrew, he went to them, start to convince them to let us go because our son need to be in a hospital as soon as possible, but they didn't listen. So I start to think, what should I do to save my son? He was between my arms and he was dying. And then I start to think I should take a risk. And that risk, if they know that I didn't have a Palestinian ID, maybe they will take me to jail or send me back to Jordan and I will never see my children again. But at that moment, the only thing that I was care about and think about, how could I save him? So I went to them, start to take to them in English to convince them. But they start to laugh at me and ask me to stay in the car, and they stopped us more than 5 hours. So when we reached the hospital, it was too late to save his life. And at the end of that day, he died. And I was really filled with hatred, anger, sadness. And I felt that all the Israeli responsible about his death. When the doctor told us that he died, I felt those words was like a bullet comes to my heart, smash it down for many pieces, start to cry like crazy, didn't know what to do. My family wasn't here. And that was so hard for me. But at the same time, I didn't think to take revenge because revenge for me will never bring him back. I take a decision to take care of my husband and to take care of my child, to let her be away from this cycle of violence. But the other decision that I take, that I don't want to have any relationship with any Israeli person. After time, my family, my husband start to convince me to have another child, and I refused for more than 3 years. And when my doctor asked me why you didn't want to have another child, I said, why I will have them? If I will lose them for some reason, they will be part of this cycle of violence. If I want, or even if I don't, they've been killed in an early age or will be in jail for the rest of their life. But after these 3 years, I have another boy, and I give him the same name, Passy, because I didn't want to forget anything happened that day. Time passed, and after 16 years, I met one of my friends that I didn't saw for a long time. So he started to talk to me about the parent circle. In the beginning, I wasn't really convinced by what he said, and I thought he's crazy. He imagined that because in my whole life, I didn't know anything about NGOs, and no one was speak about these buildings in my area, let's say. So he invited me to a conference in Bethlehem for the parent circle. And when I went there in the beginning, they were just Palestinian. I would sit with them, start to talk to them. But when the Israelis start to enter that room, I start to feel there's something aching in my chest. I didn't want to be with them in the same room. And he tried to convince me to sit. And he asked me a question. He said, I want to ask you why you didn't want to tell your other children who came after him about his story. I said to him, because I don't want them to be part of this cycle of violence. Because if they know, maybe they will start to think to take revenge. I lost one of them, and that was much more than enough for me. I can't lose another one. And then he said, but maybe this will be a good chance for you, not just to protect your children, maybe other families. So during we were arguing about stay or leave, I saw something amazed me when I saw the Palestinian, the Israeli laugh with each other, hug each other like a family member. That was the first time I saw something like that. And when the Palestinians start to talk about their personal stories, most of them, I know these kind of stories, or I know the circumstances which they spoke about. But when the Israelis start to talk about their personal stories and how they lost their beloved ones, I was really touched and moved because that was the first time I looked at them as a human like me, not as an enemy. For the first time, I felt we share the same pain, we share the same tears, even if we had a different circumstances, but we're still human. And nothing worse than losing a child or a family member. And no one could understand that pain unless someone be in the same situation. So I decided to participate one of the project, which it's the main project in the Parent Circle called the Parallel Narrative Project, which give a chance to both sides to sit face to face to speak about everything. And for most people from both sides, they didn't have a chance to meet. As a Palestinian, I just met soldiers or settlers, but to meet people like me, I didn't have another chance. So this project, we met 8 times. We have two professors from both sides who spoke about the history of the two nations. We went to visit Yad Vashem Museum to learn much more about the Holocaust. We even visited a Palestinian village was existed before 1948. It's not about comparing the pain. It's not about tell who's first, who's second, who's good, who's bad, but it's about to understand where everyone came from and learn about each other because we didn't have that just cement of wall, that wall of cement, sorry. We have walls of hatred, anger, and knowing each other. So the first activity, they asked us to spoke about something happened during the conflict affect our life. And that was the first time I spoke about what happened to my son in front of people. I couldn't complete the story. I started to cry, and there's an Israeli woman came and she started to apologize. And she said to me, yeah, I didn't hurt you, but the people who hurt you from my own people. I'm a mother too. I could understand your pain. I could understand the words that you couldn't say. She came and hugged me. Both of us started to cry. She didn't know that day by her simple words, she changed my whole life. And she returned back me, not just to myself, but even for my beliefs. As a Muslim, I believe in Quran, believe in scripture, but there's a script said, You can't judge all the people because of mistake of one person. I know it, I believe in it, but I didn't work with it because I felt of hatred and anger. So from that day, I decided to be a member in the forum, start to give lecture inside Israel, Palestine, travel around the world to spread the message of peace and reconciliation. And I thought that I made a great job and I do everything perfect and that's it. But a year ago, we've been in Jerusalem in a meeting with other NGOs. And after I spoke about my story, there's a man who stand up and start to talk about his story. He's Israeli. His name is Khan Alon. I know him like 3 years ago, but that was the first time I listened to his story. And then he mentioned that he was a high officer in the army and he served in my area and he prevented a Palestinian car which have sick children from going to a hospital. Then that was the real test. I felt someone slapped me in my face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. I didn't even know what to do. Then a few minutes, I started to cry. In my whole life, I didn't thought that I will meet one of those soldiers and to be him in front of me, that was like a big shock for me. But after he finished, we go outside the room because one of our friends asked us to go outside to speak. And he mentioned that it's so hard for him to speak about that, but he said, I want to tell you that because I know it's important for you and for me. And he mentioned that after time, his son becomes sick. And when he tried to take him to the hospital, the guard stopped him and he was in a hurry because his son was in critical condition. And then he said, just that moment, I realized what I did to the Palestinian. He quit from the army. He was jailed because of that. He established a new organization called Combatant for Peace with ex-Palestinian prisoners. And they start to work on the ground to end this occupation. So I looked at him and I said, look, Khan, it's so hard for me to listen to you and to your story. But at the same time, I want to thank you because if I know that part of your story was there and you didn't tell me, I will never forgive you. But I will forgive you now because you have that courage and honesty to speak in front of me. And then I realized this is the reconciliation. It's easy to speak about these lovely words, peace, reconciliation, love, but you sometimes ask yourself, did you mean that? Did you mean everything that you do or say? In that moment, I realized I mean everything I did. I meant everything I say. And that gave me a new power to continue what I'm doing and to work as a peace builder. Even during these hard times, as Kim said, we woke up that day, the 7th of October. I thought I heard the explosion in my village and I thought there's a car accident. I didn't understand what's going on. And then another sound of explosion.
We will get to that and ask you to talk about that. Thank you, Layla. This was a very powerful story that you shared. It's such a great gift to be a mother, but also it could be I wouldn't say a wound, but I will just stick to that. It's a great gift. And this brings me also to what Kim mentioned previously, saying that she would like to share how was it for you being a mother during the war and since 7th of October. How did you cope with that? How was Kim the mother?
I think Kim the mother was pretty broken, but you know, yesterday in a different talk, someone asked Aziz and I, how do we cope? How do we manage to continue living life? And I said, if you don't have someone to take care of, find someone to care for, because when you have someone to care for, you're preoccupied. You're caring for them, you're trying to find reasoning, you're trying to find hope for them, especially for a little kid. I have a picture actually. Sorry, what am I showing? You can see this picture of my son. This is Yarden, my friend that was held captive. I took my son for coffee one day and I didn't notice that this is where we parked. I opened the car door, he's 5 years old, and he says, "Wow, who are all these people?" And he noticed that I'm looking at a specific person. He says, "Mom, you know someone on these pictures?" And I said, "Yes, I know someone." And I showed him, you've met her before. And he said, "Why are all of these pictures up?" I took a breath. It was very difficult to answer this question for a 5-year-old. But I told him, all of these people are lost and we're looking for them. And we put up the pictures to remind everyone that we need to look for them because their families are missing them and waiting for them. And he said, "Do you miss me too?" I said, "No, you're right here with me." He said, where is Yarden?" I told him, "We don't know. And we will do everything in our power to get her back." And from that point, Tom, my son, became part of the struggle. He came to the marches and he was looking for Yarden, and he was ready to be part of it for her. And he was very, very happy when she returned, when I told him that she's back. I think that I wasn't prepared to have my son exposed to the conflict this early in life. But unfortunately, that is our reality. And from what Layla was saying, it's even earlier in life, unfortunately. And I feel, honestly, I tell this a lot to my Palestinian co-partners and colleagues and friends. I feel ashamed by any person that is causing you this feeling of hurt and these traumas in your life. And our relationship is what brings me true hope. And when the first name that my sons learn to know is Aziz, I'm assuming that their life is going to look differently. I'm assuming that they will react completely different to Palestinians when they meet them in person, even if it's not someone that they knew through me.
Thank you, Kim. This actually brings me to ask Layla, with the recent events, how you mentioned that you are a peace activist and a peace builder. How were you able to maintain your work, to keep your voice? How did you cope with that?
In fact, it's so hard sometimes to explain to your children what's going on, because I have a daughter, she's 8 years old. And when we heard that sound of explosion, she asked me many, many questions. Sometimes I feel like that I don't know what to say to her and how to explain that to her when she asked me, who sent this rocket to our village and why they do that and why they kill each other. And this hard question for that age, and you didn't know sometimes how to react, and you start to think what you should say to her and what shouldn't. But we can't lose hope, as Kim said, because of them, not just because of us, because of our children, our grandchildren, and the generation will came after us and say what they did to end this madness. And we didn't want them to say they just sit side and just watch everything. No, we have responsibility to end this somehow. We know that we are not politicians, but we could do our best to try to do let's say, to send the truth and talk about our stories, to tell everyone that if we are the people who lost their beloved ones, could put our effort together to end this, everything could be possible. It's not easy, but at the same time, we can't lose hope. We should continue.
Thank you, Layla. Kim, the question is also for you. How are you coping and able to keep hope? How are you able to keep moving forward, seeing the events and the ongoing war and the escalating violence that we are all surrounded with?
It's very difficult. As I said earlier, I was traveling and doing a lot of these talks. I think actually I'm having a harder time being further away from everything that's happening. But being surrounded by it, by the news, by continuous events, I mean, it's not like it's over. We're talking together, but we're not at the day after yet. It's still going on. There are still people being killed on a daily basis on both sides, and it's just very, very difficult on the heart. I think that what gives me hope is, as I said earlier, the conversations that I have with my Palestinian co-partners, colleagues, and friends. It's funny to say that, but that's the truth. I think that when something happens to me, when I'm feeling down, when I feel bad, when I feel scared, when I feel anything, I find that the first people I want to share it with are actually someone like Emily, for example, that we talk a lot about the situation. And I'm shocked even by myself that is my comfort zone, because it's new to me. I've been working at MEJDI for 7 years, but it's the first time that I'm really, I guess, diving deep into these kind of experiences and allowing myself to really stop and think about it, not to just live through it and continue on.
Thank you, Kim. Well, I want to leave some time for questions that we are receiving in the chat. But one question that that we are receiving a lot in several webinars, people want to know of how can they help, what can they do, how can they contribute? Can you both answer to that? Highlighting that we are also sharing Layla's organization, Parents Circle, in the chat. We will also share the link for Interact, so you get to know about its activities and what we are doing right now. Layla, can you answer? What can people do? What is your message to the international community?
In fact, they could help us in many ways. And first of all, they could spread what they heard today from our stories and how we try to deal with our pain and our loss, and how we try to make peace, because this is what we want. God created us in this world to love and to live, not to kill each other. And the other thing, that if they could convince their government not to send weapons to our country, because this is not what we want. We want peace. We want their sorry, I forget the word. To encourage us and not to pro-Israel, not to pro-Palestine, just to pro-peace. This is what we want, and this is what we need in these hard times.
Thank you, Layla. Kim, to you.
Yeah, I want to add that in parallel, there is a social media war that is going on right now, and that's a huge part of the international community. And if I would be able to ask something, what I ask is that you don't take a side. It's not helping either of us. We're all here in this region, and we're here to stay. And we're all looking for recognition within the hurt, the huge sorrow that we're dealing with right now. It is so unhelpful to continue opening social media and seeing hatred, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, seeing how violent every single place that we're looking at is becoming. It's our conflict. We live here. Please allow us to find a way forward. Creating more fear, more hatred is not helping us move forward.
Thank you, Kim. I also would like to invite you to speak about the upcoming MEJDI tour to the country.
Sure. We've been seeing a lot of solidarity missions, mainly from Jewish organizations in the US. And I started looking into these these trips, and it kind of turned and twisted my stomach, because it felt like the kibbutzim down south are becoming Auschwitz, and we're not there yet. I mean, we are not 30, 40, 70 years later. We are still living this war, and having people come to our country in war tourism is kind of difficult to cope with and to handle. And we try to offer a counter tour, something that will be more narrative focused, giving a view of the peace activist world, of the organizations that are working together to create change, and of course the two different sides, the stories of the local Palestinians, the stories of the local Israelis, and what kind of experiences they have to share. Parent Circle, of course, will be part of that, and additional organizations as well. So I urge you, if you want to learn more and if you want to be involved, then this is also a very, very good way to do that.
Thank you. I have receiving several questions in the chat. Some of them have been answered through your answers, and I'm choosing some of them that I'd like to ask both of you. And one of them is how is the Israeli government perceived now in the Israeli streets? What is happening? How do people think? And for you, Layla, how is what's happening in Gaza and Hamas is perceived by the Palestinians? And I want to add on it, how is both of you, how is your work in peace building is perceived by your communities?
Well,
Layla, sorry.
Sorry.
Please go on.
We can't ignore the fact that for 6 months, every Saturday, Israelis were hitting the streets, demonstrating against the current government. It's not something new that we have a large population that is asking the government to step down and to bring leadership that will figure out a better way to give us hope in this country. I think that there are also Israelis, we're talking about narrative, so yes, of course, there are Israelis that are for this government and are for the war. And you asked about being able to talk about peace. I think that in the first few weeks, no one was really able to do that. And it was very courageous to speak up for peace, because there was a huge sense of shock of what happened. I think that we have a lot of Americans in the audience, and if you think about how you felt on the day of 9/11, this is how Israelis are feeling. And if you look at social media, Israelis, many Israelis are still stuck on the 7th. You'll see that it's 100.10.23. People are still waking up, kind of like Groundhog Day, continuously living what happened through the 7th. So it's also hard to fight down a government throughout war, but it's starting to rise up again. This past Saturday, there was another demonstration asking for the hostages to be released, and at the same time, asking the government to take responsibility for what they are doing.
Thank you, Kim. Layla, would you like to speak about Gaza, the situation in there? How is it perceived for Palestinians?
First of all, what happened in Gaza, it's so hard for all the Palestinians in the West Bank, because most of the people in the West Bank have a relative in Gaza. I have 2 cousins. One of them, we didn't know anything about him for a whole week and about his family, but it seems that he ran away from his house because the building around his house was demolished. And another cousin who was seriously injured, they tried to take him to Egypt, but unfortunately, until now, they couldn't, and he suffered because of that. And this is not the only thing, but all the people pay attention to what happened in Gaza, and they forget what happened in the West Bank. Because since the first day of the war until today, all the West Bank under closure, all the people who work inside Israel lost their jobs. And this is a big tragedy too. most of the people in Palestine, they didn't have shelters. When rockets fell down in many places, even in the West Bank, they didn't have any shelter. And the worst thing is the settlers, they attack people in many places. And the Israeli soldiers encourage them and try to save them. They sometimes burn the houses of the Palestinian, burn their car. So the situation is very complicated in the West Bank, but no one pay attention. And about the other question that you said, what about the people who around us and felt about
Yes.
our work? There's people who encourage us and saw that the only way is to have peace. And there's another people who think, no, the peace is like a big lie and we can't do it. So you can have many ideas from different people. But I will tell you a short story about my daughter. My oldest daughter, she's now 23 years old. But when I be a member in the forum, she asked me many times to leave them because she's the oldest. She know the whole story. She know her brother. But in the beginning, it was so hard for me how to explain for her what I'm doing and for what. But we have a ceremony every year. We called it the Memorial Day. It's a joint Memorial Day for the Palestinian and Israeli to send an international message to all the people around the world. If we are the people who suffered daily because of this occupation, if we are the people who lost their beloved ones, put our effort together to end this madness and to have peace, to have reconciliation, everything could be possible. So in the ceremony, we have 4 people, 2 Palestinian, 2 Israeli spoke about their stories. I was one of the speakers like 3 years ago. So when I returned back home, I was terrified from her reaction. But when I entered the house, she came forward to me and she said, Mom, just now I understand why you did this, and I'm so proud of you. And she came and hugged me. And that was the most important point. If my children could understand, everything will be easy for me. And now she become member on the forum. She become part of the women group. And this is amazing. When I look to myself before this 16 years and how I react when someone spoke to me about Israel, I could understand both sides if you try to convince them about peace and they think it's not easy or they didn't believe in it. So I think we should speak not once, not twice, but we should continue to speak to both sides to convince them because we didn't have another solution. We can't stay and have the same situation every year or every 2 years to have another war.
It's indeed the support of the family and the friends and the people around us that gives us strength.
Yeah.
And we have arrived to the end of our webinar. I would like to ask each one of you to share with the audience some final thoughts, final ideas, things that I haven't asked you maybe, and you feel that it's definitely important to share with people. The message that you want them to take with. Layla?
I want to say, maybe I will say that all the time. If you not be part of the solution, please don't be part of the problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kim?
I continuously talk about recognition. So I think that if you have an Israeli or Palestinian friend, send them a hug, show them you care, and try to build messages that are more complete, that make you say that you're seeing everyone. And thank you for joining us. I think that this is also the best way to show that you care.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Layla. And I would like to thank everyone who participated with us in the webinar today. If you would like to see more webinars with such powerful women and leaders of our community, Please go into Interact website and subscribe to our newsletter so you receive all news. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next webinar. Thank you,
Thank you
Layla
so
and
much.
Kim.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.